Have you ever wondered what a single act of kindness can truly do? Imagine being a child with only one meal left, your stomach empty, yet choosing to give it away to someone who needs it more. Could you make that choice? This is the story of a boy who did. He gave his last meal, not because he had plenty, but because kindness spoke louder than hunger. Stay with me, and if it touches your heart, like, share, and subscribe. The town was small, the kind where the streets curled into one another like threads woven in a tight pattern. Wooden houses leaned with age, their windows glowing with faint yellow light on winter mornings. Neighbors knew one another's names, their struggles, and their joys. It was a place where secrets were hard to keep, but kindness was sometimes even harder to find. Life had not been easy for many of the families who lived there, and certainly not for Daniel and his mother. Daniel was 10 years old, with wide brown eyes that carried questions too big for his age. His father had died years earlier, leaving behind only the echo of his laughter and the memory of his strong hands. His mother had been both parents ever since, scrubbing floors, carrying laundry, sewing worn-out clothes, and sometimes working late into the night just to keep her children fed. But despite her strength, there were days when her cupboard stood almost bare. One morning, as the frost clung to the window panes and the cold air nipped at their breath, Daniel's mother handed him his tin lunchbox. It was scratched and dented from years of use, but inside it carried something precious, a piece of bread wrapped in cloth, a small portion of rice, and a carrot sliced thin to make it seem like more than it was. She tucked it gently into his bag and pressed her hand against his cheek. "This has to last you, Daniel," she whispered. "Eat it slowly, and it will carry you through the day." Daniel nodded. He never complained. He had learned early that meals were gifts, not guarantees. With his lunch clutched tightly, he stepped into the cold morning. His breath puffed into the air as he walked the narrow road toward school, the sound of his shoes crunching on the frosted ground. His stomach was already growling, but he held on to his mother's words. It was near the bakery that he saw him. A man sat hunched against the stone wall, his body folded into itself as though the cold might swallow him whole. His clothes were threadbare, little more than rags, and his shoes gaped open at the toes. His face was pale, hollow, lined with the kind of weariness that hunger and hardship carve into the skin. When Daniel passed, the man lifted his head. His eyes were dark, empty, but behind them flickered a small, desperate hope. Daniel slowed his steps. The lunchbox in his hand felt heavy. Inside was his only meal until nightfall. His mother's words rang in his ears, "Make it last." But the man's gaze held him there, frozen in place. It was not a demand, not even a request, just a silent question in those tired eyes. "Will anyone see me today?" His stomach twisted. He thought of the bread, the rice, the carrot, and how his hunger would only grow worse as the day wore on. For a moment, his fingers tightened on the handle of the lunchbox. What would you have done? Would you have walked quickly past, eyes averted, convincing yourself that someone else would help, or would you have stopped, knowing what it would cost? Daniel's heart spoke louder than his hunger. Slowly, he knelt down beside the man. His hands shook as he unlatched the tin lunchbox. The smell of bread and rice drifted into the cold air. Simple but comforting. The man's eyes widened as though he could hardly believe it. Daniel held out the food. "Here," he said softly. The man's lips trembled. "Are you sure?" His voice was hoarse, broken, as if the words hurt to speak. Daniel nodded, though his throat ached. "Yes, you need it more than I do." The man took the bread with shaking hands, tears welling in his hollow eyes. He ate slowly, savoring each bite as though it were a banquet fit for a king. Daniel watched silently, his stomach crying out in protest, yet a warmth spread in his chest that no food could have given him. In that moment, he understood something greater than hunger. He understood kindness. When Daniel arrived at school, his teacher noticed the paleness of his face and the way his hands trembled slightly. She pulled him aside and asked gently what was wrong. Daniel, honest as always, told her about the man by the bakery, about how he had given away his food. His teacher listened, her eyes softening with tears, and when she shared his story with the class, silence fell. The other children stared at him with wide eyes, and something unspoken moved through the room. By the end of the day, the story had spread. Neighbors whispered about the boy who had given away his last meal. Some felt ashamed, remembering how many times they had walked past the hungry men without stopping. Others felt inspired, as if a light had been switched on in the heart of the town. The baker, who learned that the act had taken place right outside his shop, began leaving a fresh loaf of bread on the stoop every morning for those in need. The grocer quietly set aside baskets of fruit and vegetables for families who could not pay. One small act had started a ripple, spreading further and further, changing the way people looked at one another. And the man himself, the one who had received Daniel's meal, found new strength. With food in his belly and hope in his heart, he sought help. A farmer in the town, touched by the story, offered him work tending animals. Slowly, day by day, he began to rebuild his life, all because a boy had chosen compassion over hunger. When Daniel's mother heard what he had done, she wrapped him in her arms and wept. She was not angry that he had given away the food she had worked so hard to prepare. Instead, she kissed his hair and whispered, "You have given us something greater than food, my son. You've reminded us of what it means to be truly human." Daniel didn't know how far his kindness would reach. He only knew that, in that moment, he had made a choice, and that choice had lit a flame in a town that had almost forgotten how to share. Kindness, after all, is never wasted. It multiplies. It flows from one heart to another, weaving invisible threads that bind people together. Sometimes, it begins with nothing more than a single piece of bread. And so, I ask you, what would you have done if you had been Daniel, clutching the only meal you had? Would you have opened your hands or held on tightly? What about today, in your own life? When was the last time you listened to that quiet voice urging you to give? Who around you might be waiting, not for a feast, not for riches, but for a simple act of kindness that tells them they are seen, they are valued, they are not alone? Daniel's story is not just his, it belongs to all of us, a reminder that even the smallest act can change everything. If this story touched your heart, don't let it stop here. Share it with someone who needs to believe in kindness again. Like this video, subscribe to the channel for more stories that remind us of our humanity, and carry Daniel's gift forward in your own life, because kindness is not just a story we tell, it is a story we live.